has been readmitted to the Labour Party. Just to recap, this story with Abbott began in 2023. She lost the Labour whip after writing a letter to The Observer, within it she claimed Jewish, Irish and traveller people didn't face racism the way people of colour did, pointing out the hierarchy of racism. This is what she said. It is true that many types of white people with points of difference, such as redheads, can experience this prejudice, but they are not all their lives subject to racism. In pre-civil rights America, Irish people, Jewish people, and travellers were not required to sit at the back of the bus. The controversial part was where she compared the groups to people with red hair, seemingly downplaying the racism Jewish, Irish, and traveller people face, that they weren't required to sit at the back of the bus. They certainly have. Whilst Black, queer, and disabled people were victims of the Holocaust, Jewish and Gypsy Roma travellers were too, and the obvious point that Jewish people were murdered in far greater numbers. She said sorry and claimed she sent a draft letter instead of the final version to the paper. Just before the 2024 election, Diane had the whip returned to her, yet last year the whip was taken away again after she doubled down on her initial comments. She said, "Clearly, there must be a difference between racism, which is about colour, and other types of racism, because you can see a traveller or a Jewish person walking down the street and you don't know. I just think that it's silly to try to claim that racism, which is about skin colour, is the same as other types of racism. I don't know why people would say that." In a separate incident, Abbott caused more controversy for calling the IDF the Jewish Defence Force in a tweet. Beyond horrific that the Jewish Defence Force is gunning down Palestinians as they queue for food, #Gaza genocide. But now, after a year-long independent investigation, it was recommended that she can return to the party. Newsnight ran this story last night without Diane present or given the right to reply. We have a clip from the Board of Deputies of British Jews President Phil Rosenberg.
Well, I'm very sad and very concerned. I'm sad because in many ways Diane Abbott is an icon, you know, the longest serving female MP, the first black female MP.
Mother of the House.
Mother of the House. And so you'd hope that we would find common cause in fighting racism in all its different guises. But over and over again, she's making these statements that are offensive to the Jewish community at a time when there is heightened anti-Semitism, deadly anti-Semitism, as we saw at Heaton Park, and just completely false statements. You know, when the Nazis developed their racial prejudice laws, they were basing them on discrimination against African-American people under the Jim Crow laws. There is Jews and black people should be fighting racism together, and unfortunately Diane Abbott over and over again makes these comments and then doubles down on them, and just once again she's apologised for the thing.
Well, she didn't double down this time. She actually apologised for the tweet.
She apologised for not for the original thing that she had doubled down for.
Right.
And I'm just really sad, and I'm concerned because, as you were implying, we've seen this movie before. And it doesn't end well for the Jewish community, and it doesn't end well for Labour.
As journalist Phil Holden points out, the BBC's coverage of Diane Abbott has been very biased. We need to talk about BBC Newsnight. It seems the majority of last night's episode centred on the readmission of Diane Abbott to the Labour Party, presented in a heavily slanted and biased tone. The questioning and comments put words into Abbott's mouth and adopted the most negative interpretation of her version of events. Yet, Newsnight has repeatedly refused to report on stories about abuse and misconduct towards Diane Abbott. In August last year, I approached Newsnight with copies of messages exchanged on Labour's internal party messaging system by Paul Ovenden in 2015. At the time I approached Newsnight, Ovenden was the head of strategy at Starmer's Number 10. The message I presented to Newsnight were damning of Ovenden. They show him making deeply unpleasant, offensive and sexualised jokes about Diane Abbott. Yet Newsnight refused to cover the messages. After I was told they had interested Newsnight, I was then told for weeks that they were embroiled in interminable editorial discussions. After 6 weeks, I took the hint the BBC, without saying it explicitly, weren't going to touch them. Diane Abbott is the most abused MP, and none of that was shown on Newsnight. She has been through so much and faced awful treatment from inside and outside the Labour Party. Labour MP Bel Ribeiro Addy took the BBC to task on their reporting.
Can you explain this issue with the tweet where she called the Israeli Defence Force the Jewish Defence Force? How did she end up doing that?
Well, I think she's explained it herself, and she's made sure that she's apologised for it. There was just something.
Has she explained it? Was it like just a typo, or?
He's explained it. She at the time, she deleted it immediately, I understand, and she's now apologized for the conflation. But there was something that was said earlier that was wrong, talking about the interview that she did, saying that Diane said in the interview that she had done nothing wrong. I think this is where some of the issues arise, where sometimes, the wrong sense is taken out of what Diane had said. She didn't say that. And she actually reiterated she said she stood by her apology that she made regarding the Observer letter in that same interview. So it's very strange that it was reported in that way and that you've reported it that way today.
Well, no, just so people are clear, if you go back and listen to the Jim Naughtie programme, which was broadcast on Radio 4 last year, he says to Diane Abbott, do you regret what you said in that letter? And she said no. And that is what led to her being suspended this latest time.
The thing is, I think you actually have to listen to the whole interview, because I think the way in which it was clipped following her saying no, she was referring to what he had asked her before, whether or not she was clear on the fact that people experience racism differently. She also said that she stands by the apology that she gave after having written the letter. So I think you have to listen to it in its full context.
But Belle, we're not picking at these things, in your words. We're reflecting genuine concern.
That particular interview, I'm saying if you wanted to refer to anything else that has been said, which I must note she's gone and apologized for, I would like to say, if you listen to the interview properly, as many people have, what people inferred from it and what was reported from it was not entirely accurate. That is all I'm saying. And Diane has been very, very clear about her apology, her initial apology, and the apology that she's reiterated today. She's very pleased to be back in the Labour Party. Now, I think you'll find that many people are pleased that she is also. 35,000 people signed a petition saying that she should be reinstated. And I think that's an important thing to note.
Belle, just before you interrupted me, which is the wrong way around for these things to work, I think, in TV news, I was going to say, we're not just picking at things she said in interviews and fixating on them. Nick has been reflecting back genuine concern from your colleagues in Labour about how this has been handled.
I'm making a point about specifically.
So answer the point I'm making now.
I'm making a point specifically about what you have said. You
made that point, and I'm asking you to make a different point about your colleagues tonight and how they're feeling about this.
No, I have no issue with my colleagues having concerns, and I think it's right for them to express it. I was talking about your point. Let's be very, very clear that I was talking about what you had said in regards to the interview.
Let's not get hung up on that.
Yes. No, but it's important to make a proper statement when you're reflecting back on something that someone has said. So to now try and say that I have said that an entire community's issue should, or members of my colleagues should be, issues shouldn't be of any concern, that is also not something.
I'm giving you a chance now to respond to the concerns that Nick was just reporting.
Right. Okay. And I'm saying I understand if anybody might be concerned, but Diane has been very clear and sincere in her apology.
Well, he did not like receiving pushback there, did he? Wow. Somebody in the comments has just called him a crap tash tosser, which is... that really made me giggle. Let's take a listen to the original interview with Jim Naughtie. Sorry, it took me. Which caused her second suspension, where hearing the audio instead of just reading the quote adds a bit more context.
You got into terrible trouble for a letter you wrote to the Observer about racism, and you appeared to suggest, in the view of some of your critics anyway, that the kind of anti-Semitism that the Jewish community suffered, or travellers suffered, or Irish people suffered, was somehow different from the racism that you as a young black person had suffered. You were suspended and there was a great hoo-ha. Do you look back on that with regret?
No, not at all. Clearly, there must be a difference between racism, which is about colour, and other types of racism, because you can see a traveller or a Jewish person walking down the street. You don't know. You don't know unless you stop to speak to them or you're in a meeting with them. But if you see a black person walking down the street, you see straight away that they're black. They are different types of racism.
But the effect is the same. If you are going to a synagogue on a Saturday morning and you have to have guards outside because some people might come along and want to insult you or even throw things at you. That's pretty much the same as the kind of thing you describe in your book as happening to you as a black person. The fact is, one is a person of colour and one isn't, is neither here nor there. If you suffer it, it's still damaging, isn't it?
It is here because you can spot that person of colour from hundreds of yards away. That is what is different.
You withdrew the thing. You said, look, if this is misunderstood, as you thought it was, then I apologise for it. But fundamentally, you don't believe you did anything wrong, or you didn't attempt to say something that you didn't believe.
I just think that it's silly to try and claim that racism, which is about skin colour, is the same as other types of racism. I don't know why people would say that.
But you would, I assume, condemn anti-Semitic behaviour in the same way that you would condemn racist behaviour against someone simply because of the colour of their skin.
Well, of course. And I do get a bit weary of people trying to pin the anti-Semitic label on me, because I've spent a lifetime fighting racism of all kinds, and in particular, fighting anti-Semitism.
We covered this, or I covered this back in 2023 with her original letter to The Observer. And she made a very, very stupid comment to compare Jewish people and Irish travellers to redheads. Because her point was, well, they don't face racism, they face prejudice on the scale of, redheads, right? That's obviously stupid, because redheads are not really discriminated against, of course. You've got the Holocaust, in which Gypsy Roma travellers and Jewish people, who were killed in, the greatest numbers there. So to downplay that was really, really silly. And, we criticised that at the time. However, her main point in the letter was about the hierarchy of racism. Now, for most people, it is true that if you see a person of colour, black or brown, it's very obvious, isn't it? You don't know that everyone's Jewish, do you? So the form of racism you have when it comes to people of colour is more overt. And when it comes to everyday racism, they will probably find it in greater number, because you can just look at someone. A Muslim who's dressed in their attire will receive Islamophobic abuse, right? You don't always know someone's Jewish. So it's just true that there's a different way in which racism rears its ugly head. But another point, there is also a hierarchy of racism in which we talk about Jewish people compared to other racial groups in the media and in the political landscape. And there is a huge hierarchy here, because you can say pretty much whatever you want about Muslims and you're fine. In fact, you get more political capital. Political parties get their support from doing that. And when it comes to people of colour, especially black people and especially black women, they're not taken seriously. We can go back to 2020 with the Labour leaks, in which we saw a huge hierarchy of racism, in which anti-Semitism was taken seriously, as it is today, taken so seriously in that it's completely weaponized. So, you even hear people like Reform who, do they really care about anti-racism? No. But when it comes to anti-Semitism, suddenly they're big defenders. Suddenly they care about Jewish people. They don't. So Diane Abbott is speaking a real truth here, and props to her. She is putting herself out there by saying that, because many people wouldn't talk about the hierarchy of racism, especially wouldn't say it back in 2020. So I have a problem, obviously, with the way in which Newsnight covered this. They had someone from the Board of Deputies. It's not a Jewish organisation, it's a pro-Israel organisation. Why not have Jewish Voice for Liberation on there? A left-wing, anti-Zionist, anti-genocide group of Jewish people. No, because they're politically sidelined. They were politically sidelined in the Labour Party, which is why they've changed the name from Jewish Voice for Labour to Jewish Voice for Liberation. They're never covered in the media. And when they are, the way they're treated is far different. Naomi Wimborne-Idrissi has been interviewed on the BBC before, and the way in which she's treated compared to Jewish people who represent Israel is far different, even though surely these voices should be treated equally. So the way in which the BBC covered this was disgraceful. There was no black people on the panel or black women on the panel. And again, there was no anti-Zionist Jewish people who could have pushed back. No, they've once again platformed a pro-Israel person. Props to Belle Ribeiro Addy. She called out the BBC there because, as you quoted Diane Abbott, but you also shown that clip of Jim Naughty. Jim Naughty didn't say, "Oh, in your Observer paper or letter, you diminished anti-Semitism by comparing them to redheads," and then she goes, "Oh no, I stand by that." He didn't bring that up, did he? He just brought up, well, you did say about a hierarchy of racism and that Jewish people may experience racism in a different way, which she then goes, yeah, I agree with that. So, like, the way in which the BBC reported that, they've said, oh, she completely agrees with everything she said in that draft letter to the Observer. That's not the case. It was put to her about the overarching point about the hierarchy of racism, which we all would agree there is a hierarchy of racism. I face racism based on my skin color, right? People call me the P word, and I'm half Indian. They just see the color, right? So it's insanely obvious that happens. Now, in terms of the tweet about her saying Jewish defense forces, I find that so insanely ironic that she's being criticized for that, because Zionists conflate Jewish people with Israel all of the time. They sometimes refer to them as Jewish defense forces. When it comes to October 7th, many Zionists and people in the media will say, oh, it was the largest attack on Jewish people since the Holocaust, and it was a specific anti-Semitism attack. Well, I'm sorry, but you don't get to pick and choose when you can deploy your conflation between Israel and Jewish people, because when it comes to Diane Abbott's comment, she was just playing by your rules. She said Jewish defense forces, in which you have set up that debate. You have literally said, oh no, Israel and Jewish people are the same. So you don't get to complain about that. Now, I think in terms of that tweet, she wouldn't have thought about it. She would have just said Jewish defense forces and used it in a way in which the pro-Israel people did it. I don't think there was any ill intent there, or she was trying to be racist, or she was really trying to conflate Israel and Jewish people. But of course, I wouldn't write Jewish defense forces because I always make sure I don't make that conflation. But the pro-Israel people, the political establishment, they make that conflation all the time. But suddenly, when Diane Abbott tweets about it once and says, and invokes Jewish people rather than Israeli people, suddenly that's a problem.
If I was Diane Abbott, I almost feel like I'd tell Labour to
fuck off.
Yeah. To be honest with you. Do you think it's likely that she'll
No, I think she's put out a statement saying
happy to.
Well, she's like, I'm glad I've been readmitted.
Yeah.
The thing is, if the point Andy Burnham made or his team made about bringing in Diane Abbott, because someone else had brought in as well, a Labour MP, I forget her name, but her husband was arrested for apparently being like a Chinese spy or links to that, which is kind of crazy. I don't know why she's been brought back in. Don't quote me on that, right?
Are you spreading fake news right now?
I'm spreading fake news. The radical left-wing media, the radical left. Don't invoke me Trump, because I will do Trump, right? Horrible people, horrible. So anyway, the point from the Andy Burnham's team was, we want to be more inclusive. We want to bring people together rather than Keir Starmer, who was just at like a right-wing clique, right? Well, then, following that logic, they should extend their invitation to Jeremy Corbyn. Now, saying that, I don't think Jeremy Corbyn should rejoin the Labour Party, because the party are disgusting. But if you were to be consistent, why not bring Jeremy Corbyn back? He led the Labour Party for 4 years. He brought in 600,000 members. He got more votes than Keir Starmer in both elections. And he, represents a particular view in the Labour Party. So if you wanted to bring people together and all factions together, Jeremy Corbyn should be extended, but Andy Burnham won't do that, because even if he wanted to, the media will be like, oh my God, you're really anti-Semitic again. Which, ironically, just a couple of days ago, the Board of Deputies criticised Andy Burnham, saying that, is he throwing Jews under the bus? And like, Andy Burnham has filled his cabinet and his team with Zionists and pro-Israel people, yet that's still not good for the Board of Deputies. So usually when you're attacked for anti-Semitism, you're just supposed to ignore it because it's ridiculous.